The July heat of 1872 pressed down on Juliana Norton like a wool blanket as the train lurched to its final stop in Montrose, Colorado. And the last thing she saw before the world went black was the weathered wooden platform rushing up to meet her face. Strong arms caught her before impact, cradling her against a chest that smelled of leather and sage. When Juliana's eyes fluttered open moments later, she found herself staring into the most striking pair of green eyes she had ever seen, set in a sun-bronzed face beneath a dusty brown Stetson. "Easy now," the man said, his voice a low rumble that somehow steadied her spinning world. "I have got you. You are safe." Juliana tried to speak, but her mouth felt stuffed with cotton. The journey from Boston had taken nearly a week, and she had barely eaten or drunk anything in the past 2 days, too nervous about meeting the man she was supposed to marry. A man whose face she had only seen in a single photograph, whose letters had been formal and businesslike, whose name was Henry Caldwell, and who should be somewhere on this platform waiting for her. "Water," she managed to whisper. The cowboy holding her did not hesitate. He turned his head and called out to someone nearby. "Doc, bring your canteen, quick." Within seconds, cool metal touched her lips and blessed water flowed into her mouth. Juliana drank greedily, some of it spilling down her chin. She did not care. The world slowly came back into focus, and she realized she was still in the stranger's arms, sitting on the platform while curious onlookers gathered around. "Not too fast," the cowboy warned, pulling the canteen away gently. "You will make yourself sick." Juliana nodded, finally able to take in her surroundings properly. The platform was crowded with people, some departing, others arriving, all watching her with varying degrees of curiosity and concern. The man holding her looked to be in his mid-20s, with sandy brown hair visible beneath his hat and features that were more rugged than handsome but compelling nonetheless. "Thank you," she said, her voice stronger now. "I do not know what happened. I just felt so dizzy and then—" "Heat and exhaustion from the looks of it," said an older man kneeling beside them, presumably the doctor who had provided the water. "When did you last eat, young lady?" "Yesterday morning, I think," Juliana admitted. "Maybe the morning before. I lost track of time on the train." The cowboy's jaw tightened. 2 days. No wonder you fainted." He looked around the platform, his eyes scanning the crowd. "Who are you here to meet? Is someone supposed to be collecting you?" Juliana felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. Here she was, lying in a stranger's arms on a train platform in Colorado, about to meet the man she was supposed to marry. What an impression she must be making. "Henry Caldwell," she said softly. "I am supposed to meet Henry Caldwell. He owns a ranch outside of town." The cowboy's expression changed, something flickering across his face too quickly for Juliana to identify. Surprise, concern, disappointment. "Caldwell," he repeated slowly. Then he looked at the doctor. "Henry Caldwell's mail-order bride, Doc." The doctor's eyebrows rose. "Is that so?" "Well, I have not seen Henry on the platform." "Austin, maybe you should take the young lady over to the hotel. She needs food and rest before anything else." Austin. So that was the cowboy's name, Austin something. He was already shaking his head before the doctor finished speaking. "I will take her to my ranch," Austin said firmly. "It is closer than town, and my housekeeper Sarah can look after her properly. We can send word to Caldwell that his bride arrived and needs a day to recover." "Now hold on," Juliana protested, trying to sit up straighter. "I cannot just go off with a stranger. Mr. Caldwell is expecting me today." Austin's green eyes met hers, and she saw genuine concern there, along with something else she could not quite name. "Miss, you just fainted from heat and hunger. You are in no condition to meet anyone right now, let alone start a new life at a ranch. I promise you, my intentions are purely to help. Sarah will be with you the whole time as a chaperone, and we will send word to Caldwell immediately." "But I do not even know your full name," Juliana said weakly, though she had to admit the thought of food and rest sounded like heaven. "Austin Northwood," he said. "I own the Circle N Ranch about 5 miles from here. I have known Henry Caldwell for 10 years, and I give you my word as a gentleman that you will be perfectly safe under my roof." The doctor nodded in agreement. "Austin is a good man, miss, one of the best in these parts, and he is right that you need proper care before you do anything else. A bride should not meet her groom looking like death warmed over." Juliana wanted to argue, but another wave of dizziness washed over her, and she found herself leaning more heavily against Austin's chest. She was so tired, and the thought of having to put on a brave face and meet Henry Caldwell in this condition made her want to cry. "All right," she whispered, "but please send word right away. I do not want Mr. Caldwell to think I have changed my mind." Austin's arms tightened around her just slightly, a gesture that felt protective rather than presumptuous. "I will send my ranch hand Tom immediately. He will find Caldwell and explain everything." Before Juliana could respond, Austin was standing, lifting her as easily as if she weighed nothing. She should have protested being carried like a child, but the truth was her legs felt like jelly and her head was still spinning. Instead, she allowed herself to relax against his broad chest, feeling safer than she had any right to feel with a complete stranger. Austin carried her to a wagon hitched nearby, settling her gently onto the bench seat. The doctor handed up her single battered trunk, which Austin secured in the back without comment, though Juliana noticed his jaw tighten when he saw how little she had brought with her to start her new life. "Doc, can you send Tom out to the Circle N? He was supposed to pick up supplies, but this is more important," Austin said as he climbed up beside Juliana. "I will find him and send him right along," the doctor assured them. "Miss, you take care now. And welcome to Montrose, though I wish your arrival had been under better circumstances." Juliana managed a weak smile. "Thank you, doctor." Austin clicked his tongue and the horses started forward, pulling the wagon away from the platform and down the main street of Montrose. Juliana tried to take in the town, knowing she would be living nearby soon, but her vision kept blurring at the edges. She gripped the edge of the bench seat, determined not to faint again. "Lean against me if you need to," Austin said quietly. "We have about 40 minutes of rough road ahead, and I would rather you not fall off the wagon." "I will be fine," Juliana insisted, though even she could hear how unconvincing she sounded. "Stubborn," Austin observed, but there was no criticism in his tone, almost a hint of admiration. "Let me guess. Boston or Philadelphia?" "Boston," Juliana admitted. "How did you know?" "The accent, mostly, and the clothes. You are dressed for a parlor, not a Colorado summer." He glanced at her dark wool traveling dress and buttoned collar. "No wonder you fainted. You must be roasting." Juliana looked down at her dress, one of only 3 she owned, and felt a familiar sting of inadequacy. Everything she wore was at least 3 years old, carefully mended and maintained but clearly out of fashion. She had done her best to look respectable for her arrival, but she supposed she just looked foolish instead. "I did not have anything else suitable for traveling," she said quietly. Austin must have heard something in her voice because he did not press the subject. Instead, he said, "Sarah will have something cooler you can borrow. She is a practical woman. Raised 3 daughters out here, so she knows what works in this climate." They rode in silence for a while, the wagon bouncing over the rutted road. Montrose disappeared behind them, replaced by open land that seemed to stretch forever in all directions. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still touched with snow even in July. Juliana had never seen anything like it. Boston had been all narrow streets and tall buildings, the sky a strip of blue between rooftops. Here, the sky was endless, and the land made her feel both impossibly small and strangely free. "Why did you come?" Austin asked suddenly, "if you do not mind my asking." "It is a long way from Boston to Colorado for a woman traveling alone." Juliana considered how much to tell him. The whole truth felt too personal, too raw, but something about Austin made her want to be honest. Maybe it was the way he had caught her when she fell, or the genuine concern in his eyes, or simply that she was too tired to maintain pretenses. "I did not have much choice," she said finally. "My father died last year, leaving debts I could not pay. I was working as a seamstress, but it was not enough. I was about to lose our boarding house room when I saw Mr. Caldwell's advertisement in the newspaper. He seemed like a decent man from his letters, and he promised a home and security. That was more than I had in Boston." Austin was quiet for a moment, his hands steady on the reins. "I am sorry about your father," he said. "That must have been difficult." It was. Juliana surprised herself by continuing. "He was a clerk for a shipping company, not a wealthy man but honest and kind. He always said he would provide for me, but when he died, I discovered he had been borrowing money to keep up appearances. I think he was ashamed that he could not give me the life my mother would have wanted. She died when I was 12. "So you have been on your own for a year," Austin said. It was not a question. "Yes. And I learned very quickly that a single woman with no family has very few options in Boston. I could continue barely surviving as a seamstress, I could take a position as a servant, or I could find a husband. Mr. Caldwell's advertisement seemed like the best of my limited choices." "And what did his advertisement say?" Austin asked, his tone carefully neutral. Juliana recited from memory. "Rancher in Colorado Territory seeking wife. Must be of good moral character, hardworking, and willing to embrace frontier life. Preference for someone who can read and write. Companionship and security offered in return." "Companionship and security," Austin repeated, something odd in his voice. "That sounds like Henry." "Do you know him well?" Juliana asked, suddenly hungry for any information about the man she was supposed to marry. Austin was quiet for so long that Juliana thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, "I have known Henry Caldwell for 10 years, like I said. He is a hard worker, owns a decent spread, pays his debts. He is honest enough in his business dealings." "But," Juliana prompted, hearing the unspoken reservation. "But nothing," Austin said, though his jaw was tight. "He is a fine choice for a husband. You will want for nothing material." It was not exactly a ringing endorsement, but Juliana told herself she was reading too much into it. Austin Northwood did not know her, did not know what she needed or wanted. Material security was more than she had now, and that was enough. It had to be enough. The wagon crested a small rise, and Austin pointed ahead. "There is the Circle Inn." Juliana looked where he indicated and saw a collection of buildings nestled in a valley. A large barn, several corrals, a bunkhouse, and a 2-story ranch house with a wraparound porch. It looked solid and well-maintained, prosperous without being ostentatious. Smoke rose from the chimney despite the summer heat, and Juliana could see figures moving around the yard. "It is lovely," she said honestly. Austin glanced at her, something like pleasure crossing his face. "Thank you. I built most of it myself, with help from my hands. It has been 10 years of hard work, but I am proud of what we have accomplished." As they drew closer, a woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. She was perhaps in her 50s, with graying hair pulled back in a practical bun, and a face that spoke of both kindness and no-nonsense competence. "Austin Northwood," "Where have you been?" she called as the wagon pulled up. "Tom said you went to town for supplies 3 hours ago." Then her eyes landed on Juliana, and her expression shifted to concern. "Who is this poor child? She looks half dead." "This is Miss Juliana Norton," Austin said, setting the brake and jumping down. He moved to Juliana's side and held up his arms to help her down. "She is Henry Caldwell's mail-order bride. She fainted on the train platform, and I brought her here to recover before she meets Henry." Sarah's eyebrows shot up. Henry Caldwell's bride, land sakes, and he was not even there to meet her. "I did not see him on the platform," Austin said, lifting Juliana down. Her legs wobbled, and he kept his hands on her waist until she steadied. "Tom is riding out to the Caldwell place now to let Henry know she arrived safely and is recovering here." Sarah bustled forward, all maternal concern now. "You poor dear. Come inside right now. When did you last eat?" 2 days ago," Austin answered for her, his tone grim. 2 days? Sarah looked horrified. "What were you thinking, traveling like that?" "Never mind. We will get some food in you right away." "Austin, help her inside and then make yourself scarce. I need to get her out of those ridiculous clothes and into something sensible." Austin guided Juliana up the porch steps and into the house. The interior was cooler than outside, thanks to thick walls and strategic window placement. The main room was spacious and comfortable, with handmade furniture and curtains that looked like Sarah's handiwork. It was a home, not just a house, and Juliana felt something in her chest tighten at the warmth of it. Sarah directed Austin to settle Juliana in a chair at the large dining table, then shooed him away with promises to call him when the meal was ready. Once he disappeared, presumably to the barn, Sarah turned her full attention to Juliana. "Now then, let me look at you properly," she said, studying Juliana with keen eyes. "You are far too thin, and these clothes are suffocating you. How old are you, child?" 22, Juliana said. 22 and already crossing the country to marry a stranger," Sarah said, shaking her head. "These are strange times we live in. Well, we will get you fed and rested, and then we can worry about Henry Caldwell. First things first, let us get you into something cooler." Sarah led Juliana upstairs to a bedroom that was clearly meant for guests, with a simple bed covered in a cheerful quilt and a washstand in the corner. She produced a dress of light cotton, faded from many washings but clean and practical. "This was my daughter Emma's," Sarah explained. "She is married now and living in Denver, but she left some things behind. You are about her size, I think. Not quite as tall, but that does not matter for everyday wear." Juliana wanted to protest borrowing a stranger's clothes, but the thought of getting out of her heavy wool dress was too appealing. With Sarah's help, she stripped down to her chemise and corset, then put on the borrowed dress. It was looser than her Boston clothes, designed for comfort and movement rather than fashion, and the light cotton felt like heaven against her overheated skin. "There now," Sarah said with satisfaction. "You look much better already. Wash your face and hands and then come down for some food. I have got stew on the stove and fresh bread from this morning." Left alone, Juliana poured water from the pitcher into the basin and washed her face and hands, then looked at herself in the small mirror above the washstand. She barely recognized the woman staring back. Her dark hair had come loose from its pins, falling around her face in damp waves. Her brown eyes looked enormous in her thin face, and her skin was pale despite the sunburn on her nose and cheeks from the train journey. She looked young and frightened and completely out of place. This was not how she had imagined arriving in Colorado. She was supposed to step off the train looking composed and capable, ready to be the wife Henry Caldwell needed. Instead, she had fainted into a stranger's arms and was now wearing borrowed clothes in that stranger's house. dependent on his charity and kindness. Juliana squared her shoulders and reminded herself that she had survived her father's death, a year of poverty in Boston, and a week-long journey across the country. She could survive this temporary embarrassment. Tomorrow, she would meet Henry Caldwell properly, and her new life would begin. This was just a small detour. She made her way back downstairs, following the smell of food and the sound of voices. In the dining room, she found Austin had returned and was setting the table while Sarah ladled stew into bowls. They both looked up when she entered, and Austin's eyes widened slightly before he looked away quickly. "Much better," Sarah declared. "Sit down, dear. Austin, stop hovering and sit." Juliana took a seat, and Sarah placed a bowl of stew in front of her, along with thick slices of fresh bread and butter. The smell alone made her stomach clench with hunger, and she had to force herself not to fall on the food like a starving animal. "Eat slowly," Austin advised from across the table. "Your stomach is not used to food right now." Juliana nodded and took a careful spoonful of stew. It was delicious, rich with beef and vegetables, seasoned perfectly. She had to stop herself from eating too fast, knowing Austin was right about her stomach. "So," Sarah said, settling into her own chair with a cup of coffee. "Tell me about yourself, Juliana. I may call you Juliana, yes, of course," Juliana said between careful bites. "There is not much to tell. I am from Boston, as Mr. Northwood guessed. My father was a clerk. I was a seamstress after he died, and now I am here." "And Henry Caldwell is expecting you," Sarah said, her tone neutral but her eyes watchful. "Have you corresponded with him long?" "3 months," Juliana said. "His advertisement appeared in March, and I responded immediately. We exchanged perhaps a dozen letters. He sent money for the train ticket 2 weeks ago." Austin had been quiet, eating his stew, but now he looked up. "What did he tell you about his ranch, his life here?" Juliana tried to remember the details from Henry's letters, but they had been frustratingly sparse on personal information. "He said he owns 500 acres and runs cattle. He has a house and several hired hands. He said he needed a wife to help manage the household and provide companionship. He was very clear that it would be a working ranch, not a life of leisure." "That is accurate enough," Austin said. "Henry has built up a good operation. He works hard." Again, that neutral tone that somehow conveyed reservations. Juliana set down her spoon and looked directly at Austin. "Please, if there is something I should know about Mr. Caldwell, tell me now. I have come all this way, and I have burned my bridges in Boston. I need to know what I am walking into." Austin and Sarah exchanged a look that Juliana could not quite read. Finally, Austin said, "Henry Caldwell is not a bad man. He is honest, hardworking, and he will provide for you as he promised. But he is also a man who sees the world in terms of what is useful and practical. He wanted a wife like he wanted a new plow or a good horse, something to serve a purpose." "I see," Juliana said quietly, "and you disapprove of that approach." "I think marriage should be more than a business arrangement," Austin said, his green eyes intense. "But that is just my opinion. Plenty of marriages out here start as practical arrangements and grow into something more. Maybe yours will too." Sarah cleared her throat. What Austin is trying to say in his fumbling way is that Henry Caldwell is not a romantic man. He will treat you fairly and provide well, but do not expect poetry or grand gestures. He is nearly 40 years old and set in his ways. "You will need patience. 40 years old." Juliana had known Henry was older, but seeing it stated so plainly made her realize the gap between them. She was 22 and he was 40. He had lived almost twice as long as she had, built a life in a ranch while she was still a child. What would they possibly have in common? But she reminded herself that common interests were a luxury she could not afford. She needed security, a home, a future. Romance was for women with options, and she had none. "Thank you for being honest," she said finally. "I appreciate it, even if the truth is not particularly comforting." Austin looked like he wanted to say more, but Sarah shot him a warning look and changed the subject. "Tell me about Boston. I have never been to a big city. What was it like?" Juliana obliged, describing the narrow streets and tall buildings, the harbor with its ships, the markets and theaters and churches. She talked about the seasons, how the cold came early and stayed late, how spring brought flowers to the common and summer brought stifling heat to the cramped boarding houses. She talked about everything except the loneliness, the hunger, the fear that had driven her west. By the time she finished eating, Juliana's exhaustion had returned with a vengeance. Sarah noticed immediately and insisted she go upstairs to rest. Juliana did not have the energy to argue. She climbed the stairs with heavy legs, collapsed onto the guest bed still in her borrowed dress, and fell asleep almost immediately. She woke to twilight and the sound of voices below. For a moment, she did not know where she was, then memory returned in a rush. Colorado. The train platform. Austin catching her. She sat up slowly, relieved to find her head clear and her strength somewhat restored. The voices below grew louder, and Juliana recognized Austin's deep rumble along with a sharper, unfamiliar voice. Her heart began to pound. Was that Henry Caldwell? Had he come for her? She stood and smoothed down her borrowed dress, wishing desperately for a mirror to check her appearance. She ran her fingers through her hair, trying to tame it into some semblance of order, then made her way downstairs. In the main room, she found Austin facing a man she did not recognize. He was perhaps an inch taller than Austin, lean and weathered, with graying dark hair and a hard face. He wore range clothes and looked like he had ridden hard to get here. This had to be Henry Caldwell. Both men turned when Juliana appeared, and the stranger's eyes raked over her with an assessing gaze that made her skin prickle. "Miss Norton," the man said, his voice flat. "I am Henry Caldwell. I apologize for not being at the train platform to meet you. I was dealing with a situation with my cattle and lost track of time." Juliana descended the last few steps, acutely aware of both men watching her. "Mr. Caldwell, I apologize for the circumstances of our meeting. I am afraid I was not at my best when I arrived. So I heard. Northwood here says you fainted from hunger." Henry's tone held disapproval, though Juliana could not tell if it was directed at her or the situation. "That is not a promising start." "I am recovered now," Juliana said, lifting her chin, "and I assure you I am normally quite healthy and capable. The journey was longer and more difficult than I anticipated." Henry looked her over again, and Juliana had the uncomfortable feeling of being evaluated like livestock. "You are younger than I expected, and smaller. Can you cook?" "Yes," Juliana said. "And sew, clean, manage a household budget, read and write, and do basic arithmetic." "That is something, at least." Henry turned to Austin. "I appreciate you looking after her, Northwood. I will take her home now." "No," Austin said flatly. Both Juliana and Henry stared at him. "Excuse me," Henry said, his voice cold. "She just woke up. She has barely recovered, and it will be full dark in an hour," Austin said. "She should stay here tonight, get a proper rest, and you can collect her in the morning." "She is my intended wife," Henry said. "I will decide when and where she goes." "She is a human being who fainted from exhaustion and hunger this afternoon," Austin shot back, his voice hard. "She needs rest, not to be dragged off to your ranch in the dark." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Juliana stepped forward, not wanting to be the cause of conflict. "Mr. Caldwell, perhaps Mr. Northwood is right. I am still quite tired, and I would hate to be a burden when I arrive at your ranch. If I could rest tonight and come in the morning, I would be better able to begin my duties as your wife." Henry looked at her, and something in his expression made Juliana's stomach tighten. "Are you refusing to come with me?" "I am simply suggesting a delay of one night for practical reasons," Juliana said carefully. "She stays here tonight," Austin said, his tone brooking no argument. "She will be ready to leave first thing in the morning. Sarah can have her packed and fed by 8 o'clock. Henry's jaw worked, and for a moment Juliana thought he might argue further. Then he gave a curt nod. "Fine. 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. I will send one of my hands to collect her. And Miss Norton, I expect you to be ready. I have wasted enough time on this matter already." Without another word, Henry turned and strode out of the house. They heard his horse gallop away moments later, the sound fading into the evening. Juliana sank into the nearest chair, her legs suddenly weak again. "I am sorry," she said. "I have caused you nothing but trouble, Mr. Northwood." Austin crouched down in front of her, his eyes searching her face. "Do you want to marry him?" The question caught Juliana off guard. "I do not understand." "Henry Caldwell. Do you want to marry him? Because you do not have to. If you have changed your mind, I can buy you a ticket back to Boston or Denver or anywhere else you want to go." Juliana stared at him, this stranger who had caught her when she fell, who had fed her and sheltered her, and who was now offering her an escape. Part of her wanted to say yes, wanted to take his offer and run as far and fast as she could from Henry Caldwell's cold eyes and assessing gaze. But she was not a coward, and she was not a fool. Austin Northwood was being kind, but his kindness would not pay her debts or give her a home. She had made a commitment, had accepted Henry's money for the train ticket, had come all this way precisely because she had no other options. "I do not have anywhere else to go," she said quietly. "And I gave my word. I will marry Mr. Caldwell as I promised." Austin's hands clenched into fists where they rested on his knees. "Your word to a man who could not be bothered to meet you at the train station, who looks at you like you are a disappointing purchase." "My word nonetheless," Juliana said. "I am not a woman who breaks promises, Mr. Northwood, even when keeping them is difficult." Austin stood abruptly and paced away, running a hand through his hair. Sarah appeared in the doorway, having clearly been listening. "She has made her choice, Austin. You have to respect it." "Her choice?" Austin whirled to face Sarah. "What choice? She came here because she was desperate and alone, and now she's going to tie herself to a man who does not deserve her." "And what would you have her do?" Sarah asked gently. "She gave her word and accepted his help. She is trying to do the honorable thing." "The honorable thing would be for Caldwell to release her from their agreement," Austin said hotly. "Any man with eyes can see they are completely unsuited." Juliana stood, drawing both their attention. "Please, stop talking about me as if I am not here. I understand your concerns, Mr. Northwood, and I am grateful for them. Truly. But my situation has not changed since this morning. I need security and a home, and Mr. Caldwell is offering both. Whatever his faults, he kept his word to me. He sent the money, he has a home waiting, and he has agreed to marry me. I will not repay that by breaking my promise." Austin looked at her for a long moment, something painful in his eyes. "You are a brave woman, Juliana Norton. Braver than I think you realize. But bravery should not have to feel like a sacrifice." Before Juliana could respond, Austin grabbed his hat from the peg by the door and left the house, the door closing firmly behind him. Sarah sighed and moved to put a comforting arm around Juliana's shoulders. "Do not mind him," Sarah said. "Austin has strong feelings about how people should be treated, especially women. His mother was married to a hard man, and Austin swore he would never be like his father. I think seeing you with Henry reminds him too much of what his mother endured." Mr. Caldwell is not cruel, is he? Juliana asked, suddenly frightened. No, not cruel, Sarah assured her. Just cold, practical. He will not hurt you, but he probably will not warm you either, if you understand my meaning. Juliana understood perfectly. She was trading the possibility of starving alone in Boston for the certainty of being materially provided for but emotionally neglected in Colorado. It was still the better bargain, even if it did not feel like much of a victory. That night, Juliana lay awake in the guest room, staring at the ceiling and listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch. In the distance, cattle lowed. Closer, she could hear horses moving in the corral. The wind whispered through the eaves, carrying the scent of sage and grass. She thought about Henry Caldwell's cold appraisal and Austin Northwood's fierce protectiveness. She thought about the life waiting for her at the Caldwell Ranch and wondered what she had truly agreed to. But mostly, she thought about Austin's eyes when he had asked if she wanted to marry Henry, and the way her heart had stuttered when he said her name. It did not matter, she told herself firmly. Austin Northwood was a kind stranger, nothing more. Tomorrow, she would go to the Caldwell Ranch and become Henry's wife, and she would make the best of it. She had survived worse. She would survive this too. But as she finally drifted off to sleep, it was Austin's face she saw in her dreams and the memory of his arms catching her as she fell. Morning came too quickly. Juliana woke to Sarah knocking gently on the door, announcing that breakfast was ready. She dressed in her own clothes this time, the heavy Boston dress that marked her as an outsider, and pinned her hair up carefully. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a woman trying very hard to look brave. Downstairs, she found Austin and Sarah at the table, but the easy warmth of yesterday was gone. Austin barely looked at her as she sat down, focusing intently on his eggs and bacon. Sarah tried to maintain cheerful conversation, but it fell flat in the tense atmosphere. Austin has offered to drive you to the Caldwell place himself, Sarah said. Henry sent word that his hands are busy with a fence repair, so Austin volunteered. Juliana glanced at Austin, who still was not looking at her. That is kind of you, Mr. Northwood, but I do not want to impose further. It is no imposition, Austin said, his tone clipped. The Caldwell Ranch borders mine. It is on my way. They finished breakfast in uncomfortable silence. Juliana helped Sarah clear the dishes, then collected her few belongings. Sarah hugged her warmly and made her promise to send word if she needed anything at all. Juliana returned the embrace, grateful for this woman's kindness even if she knew she would probably never see her again. Austin loaded her trunk into the wagon, and Juliana climbed up onto the seat. As they pulled away from the Circle Inn, she turned to look back at the house. Sarah stood on the porch, waving. Juliana waved back, feeling as though she was leaving the only safety she had known in this new land. The ride to the Caldwell Ranch took 20 minutes. Austin drove in silence, his jaw tight and his hands gripping the reins harder than necessary. Juliana searched for something to say, some way to ease the tension, but everything she thought of seemed inadequate or inappropriate. Finally, unable to bear the silence any longer, she said, "I am sorry if I upset you, Mr. Northwood. That was never my intention." "You did not upset me," Austin said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "You are just making a choice I disagree with, but it is your choice to make." "Is it though?" Juliana asked quietly. "You offered to send me somewhere else, but where would I go? I have no money, no family, no prospects. At least with Mr. Caldwell, I will have a roof over my head and food to eat. Is that really enough?" Austin turned to look at her, his green eyes intense. "Just survival. Do you not want more from life than that? Wanting more and being able to have more are two different things," Juliana said. "I learned that lesson when my father died. I wanted to keep our home to maintain our life. But wanting it did not make it possible. Sometimes, we have to accept what is available rather than hold out for what we wish we could have. That is a sad way to live, Austin said. It is a practical way to live, Juliana corrected. And practicality is what has kept me alive this past year. Austin looked like he wanted to argue more, but the Caldwell ranch came into view. It was smaller than the Circle Inn, with a house that looked more functional than welcoming. The barn was in good repair, and the corrals were well maintained, but there was something stark about the place. No flowers, no extra touches, nothing that suggested anyone lived there rather than just worked there. A man emerged from the barn as they approached. Not Henry, but a younger man with a weathered face and suspicious eyes. He watched as Austin pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house. "Morning, Jack," Austin called. "I have brought Miss Norton as promised. Is Henry around?" "He is checking the north pasture," Jack said, his eyes on Juliana. "Said to settle her in the house and he would be back by noon." Austin's jaw tightened. "He is not even here," Jack shrugged. "Cattle do not care about schedules. Boss said to bring her inside and make sure she has everything she needs. I will fetch her trunk." Austin set the brake and jumped down, then moved to help Juliana. His hands lingered on her waist a moment longer than necessary as he lifted her down. "You do not have to do this," he said quietly, urgently. "Just say the word and I will take you back to the Circle Inn right now." Juliana met his eyes, seeing genuine concern there and something else that made her heart ache, but she shook her head. "I gave my word, Mr. Northwood. I have to see this through." "Austin," he said. "My name is Austin, and you are the stubbornest woman I have ever met." "Thank you," Juliana said, managing a small smile. "I will take that as a compliment." Jack had already carried her trunk into the house. Austin walked with her to the door, and for a moment they stood on the threshold, neither quite willing to take the final step. "If you need anything," Austin said. "If you are ever in trouble or scared or just need a friend, send word to the Circle Inn. I will come. I promise you that." "Thank you," Juliana whispered, "for everything, for catching me when I fell, for your kindness. I will not forget it." Austin reached out as if to touch her cheek, then dropped his hand. "I will not forget you either, Juliana Norton." Then he turned and walked back to his wagon, climbing up and driving away without looking back. Juliana watched until he disappeared down the road, feeling as though something precious was slipping through her fingers. "You coming inside or what?" Jack called from somewhere in the house. Juliana squared her shoulders, took a deep breath, and stepped over the threshold into her new life. The interior of the Caldwell house was as stark as the exterior. The main room served as kitchen and dining area combined, with a wood stove, a rough table with mismatched chairs, and shelves holding basic supplies. Everything was clean but austere, functional without any softness or comfort. Jack showed her around quickly. Besides the main room, there was a bedroom that was clearly Henry's, with a large bed and a wardrobe. A second, smaller room held a narrow bed and little else. Jack pointed to it. "Boss said you can have this room until the wedding. After that, you will share his room." Juliana nodded, not trusting her voice. The reality of what she had agreed to was sinking in. She would marry Henry Caldwell, a man she did not know and who clearly did not care to know her. She would share his bed, run his house, and spend her days in this isolated place with a man who looked at her like an acquisition. "I will leave you to settle in," Jack said. "Boss should be back around noon. There is bread and cheese in the larder if you are hungry." After Jack left, Juliana sank onto the narrow bed in her new room and allowed herself exactly 5 minutes of tears. Then she dried her eyes, unpacked her trunk, and went to explore the kitchen. If she was going to be Henry Caldwell's wife, She would start as she meant to go on, with dignity and competence, even if her heart was not in it. Henry did not return at noon, or at 1 o'clock, or at 2. By 3 o'clock, Juliana had cleaned the kitchen from top to bottom, made an inventory of the larder, and started a stew for dinner. She was washing the floor when she heard a horse outside. She stood quickly, smoothing her hair and her dress, and went to the door. Henry swung down from his horse, covered in dust and looking tired. His eyes swept over her briefly. "You are here," he said. It was not quite a question. "Yes, Mr. Caldwell, as promised." "Good, I am hungry. Is there food?" "Stew nearly ready. And fresh bread." Henry grunted what might have been approval and brushed past her into the house. He washed his hands and face in the basin by the door, then sat at the table expectantly. Juliana ladled stew into a bowl and set it in front of him, along with the bread she had found and some butter. Henry ate without comment, not looking at her. Juliana stood by the stove, unsure whether to sit, to serve herself, to speak. Finally, she cleared her throat. "Mr. Caldwell, perhaps we should discuss the arrangements. The wedding and my duties here, and we will marry Sunday," Henry interrupted. "Circuit preacher comes through once a month, and he will be in Montrose this Sunday. That gives you 4 days to prepare whatever you need to prepare. As for your duties, they are straightforward. Cook, clean, mend, help with the garden. Standard wife work. Are you capable of that?" "Yes," Juliana said quietly. "Good. I will be busy with the ranch most days. I expect meals on time, a clean house, and no complaints. In return, you will have a home and security. That was our agreement." "What about companionship?" Juliana asked, remembering that word from his advertisement. "You said you wanted companionship." Henry looked at her for the first time since sitting down, really looked at her. "Companionship is a word for advertisements. I needed a wife, not a companion. If companionship develops over time, fine. If not, that is fine too. I am not a romantic man, Miss Norton. The sooner you understand that, the easier this will be for both of us." Juliana felt something inside her crack, but she kept her face neutral. "I understand, Mr. Caldwell. Good. Now serve yourself some stew and sit down. No wife of mine will stand while I eat like a servant." It was perhaps the kindest thing he had said to her, and it was delivered in the same flat tone as everything else. Juliana served herself and sat across from Henry, eating mechanically while he focused on his meal. They did not speak again until he pushed back from the table. "That was adequate," he said. "I have work to finish in the barn. I will be back after dark. Do not wait up." And then he was gone, leaving Juliana alone in the silent house with her adequate stew and her breaking heart. The next 4 days followed the same pattern. Henry left early, returned only for meals, spoke only to give instructions or brief comments on her cooking. Juliana cleaned, cooked, mended his shirts, and tried to make the house feel like a home. She found some wildflowers growing near the creek and put them in a jar on the table. Henry did not notice. She tried to engage him in conversation over meals, asking about the ranch, the cattle, his life before her arrival. He answered in monosyllables and seemed annoyed by her attempts. Eventually, she stopped trying. The only bright spot was when Jack's wife Martha came to visit. Martha was a kind woman in her 30s who lived with Jack in a small cabin on the Caldwell property. She brought Juliana some preserves as a welcome gift and stayed for tea, chatting about the neighbors, the town, and life in the area. "Henry has always been a quiet one," Martha said diplomatically. "He keeps to himself mostly, but he is a fair employer. Jack has worked for him for 5 years now, and Henry has always paid on time and treated us decent." "That is good to know," Juliana said, grateful for any information. Martha hesitated, then added, "Give him time. He is set in his ways, but he is not a bad man. Just lonely, I think, though he would never admit it. Juliana appreciated Martha's kindness, even if she suspected Martha was painting Henry in the best possible light. It was clear that Martha felt sorry for her, which was somehow worse than if she had been critical. Sunday arrived too quickly. Juliana dressed in her best dress, which was still her second best since she had sold her actual best dress before leaving Boston to pay for necessities. It was dark blue cotton with white trim, respectable but plain. She did her hair carefully and looked at herself in the small mirror Henry had grudgingly hung in her room. She looked like a woman going to a funeral, not a wedding. Henry had a wagon hitched and waiting. The drive to Montrose was silent. At the church, a small group had gathered for the circuit preacher's monthly service and the weddings he would perform afterward. Juliana recognized the doctor from the train platform and Sarah from the Circle Inn, but she did not see Austin. The service was brief and impersonal. Juliana and Henry stood before the preacher, along with two other couples also getting married. The preacher went through the ceremony mechanically, clearly having performed it hundreds of times. Henry's responses were flat and unemotional. Juliana's voice shook slightly when she said her vows, but she got through them. When the preacher pronounced them married and told Henry he could kiss his bride, Henry gave Juliana the briefest possible peck on the cheek, so quick it barely registered as a kiss at all. Then he shook the preacher's hand, paid him, and turned to Juliana. "We should head back. The cattle need checking." That was it. No celebration, no well-wishers, no moment of acknowledgement that their lives had just changed fundamentally. They simply got back in the wagon and drove home. That night, for the first time, Juliana moved her few belongings into Henry's room. She changed into her nightgown in the privacy of the small room, then made her way to the larger bedroom with trembling hands. Henry was already in bed, wearing a nightshirt, looking at her with the same assessing expression he had worn when they first met. Juliana climbed into bed beside him, her heart pounding. "Relax," Henry said, his tone slightly less flat than usual. "I am not going to hurt you." He reached for her, and Juliana closed her eyes, thinking of England and lying back and thinking of duty. Henry was efficient and relatively gentle, if completely unromantic. It was over quickly, and then he rolled away from her. "Good night," he said. Juliana lay awake long after Henry's breathing deepened into sleep, staring at the ceiling and wondering how her life had come to this. She was married now, truly and legally bound to a man who did not love her and whom she did not love. This was her life now. This silent house, these mechanical interactions, this endless stretch of days with a stranger who was now her husband. She thought of Austin Northwood asking if she wanted to marry Henry, offering her an escape. She thought of his arms catching her on the train platform, his fierce protectiveness, the way his eyes had held something more than simple kindness when he looked at her. She thought of all of this, and then she pushed it firmly out of her mind. She had made her choice, and she would live with it. That was what practical women did. They survived. But as a single tear slid down her cheek in the darkness, Juliana wondered if survival was really enough. 2 months passed. Summer deepened into early autumn, and Juliana settled into the rhythm of her new life. She cooked, cleaned, mended, kept the house in order. Henry remained distant but not unkind. He provided everything she needed materially and asked for nothing beyond basic wifely duties. They shared a bed but not intimacy, meals but not conversation, a house but not a home. Juliana told herself she was content. She had security, shelter, food. She was better off than she had been in Boston. This was what she had wanted. But late at night, when Henry was asleep beside her and the wind whispered through the eaves, Juliana allowed herself to acknowledge the truth. She was desperately lonely. more lonely than she had ever been, even in the cramped boarding house in Boston, because at least there she had been surrounded by life and noise and the possibility of connection. Here, there was only silence and duty and the slow realization that she had traded one kind of poverty for another. She had not seen Austin Northwood since her wedding day, though she often found herself thinking of him. Martha had mentioned in passing that Austin had been spending more time in Montrose lately, though she did not know why. Juliana told herself she did not care, that it did not matter, but her heart knew she was lying. In late September, Henry announced that he needed to go to Denver for a cattle auction and would be gone for a week. It was the longest conversation they had had in weeks. "Jack and Martha will be nearby if you need anything," he said. "There is money in the tin on the shelf if you need to go into town for supplies. I will be back next Sunday." Juliana nodded, feeling guilty at the relief that flooded through her at the prospect of a week without his cold presence. Henry left at dawn the next morning. After he disappeared down the road, Juliana stood in the doorway of the house and breathed deeply, feeling some of the tension leave her shoulders. A week of freedom. A week to be herself, whatever that meant anymore. She threw herself into projects she had been putting off. She scrubbed every surface in the house, reorganized the larder, mended all of Henry's clothes that needed mending. She baked bread and pies, made preserves from the last of the summer berries, worked in the garden. She kept busy from dawn until well after dark, exhausting herself so she would not have time to think. On the third day, Martha came to visit and insisted Juliana come to town with her. "You have been cooped up here for 2 months," Martha said firmly. "A few hours in town will do you good." Juliana hesitated, but the thought of seeing other people, of being somewhere other than the ranch, was too appealing. She changed into her better dress and climbed into Martha's wagon. Montrose was busier than it had been the day Juliana arrived. The main street bustled with activity as ranchers and townspeople conducted business, socialized, and enjoyed the pleasant autumn day. Martha took Juliana to the general store, then to the milliner's shop, where Martha needed to pick up a hat she had ordered. They were leaving the milliner's when Juliana heard her name. "Juliana!" She turned and found Austin Northwood standing a few feet away, hat in hand, looking at her with an expression she could not quite read. He looked the same as she remembered, perhaps a bit thinner, with shadows under his eyes that suggested he had not been sleeping well. "Mr. Northwood," Juliana said, acutely aware of Martha watching with interest. "How are you?" "I am well," Austin said, though his eyes suggested otherwise. "And you? How is married life?" "It is fine," Juliana said, the lie tasting bitter on her tongue. "Everything is fine." Austin's eyes searched her face, and she had the uncomfortable feeling that he could see right through her polite words to the loneliness beneath. "You look thinner," he said. "Are you eating enough?" "Of course," Juliana said quickly. "I am simply adjusting to the work of running a ranch household." "And Caldwell," Austin's jaw was tight. "He is treating you well. He is providing everything he promised," Juliana said carefully. It was the truth, if not the whole truth. Austin looked like he wanted to say more, but Martha stepped forward. "Austin Northwood, stop interrogating the poor girl. You are making her uncomfortable." Austin flushed slightly. "I apologize. I did not mean to pry. It is just good to see you, Juliana. I have wondered how you were doing." "I am fine," Juliana repeated. "Thank you for your concern." An awkward silence fell. Finally, Austin said, "If you ladies need anything, I am heading back to the Circle N shortly. I would be happy to provide an escort." "Actually," Martha said, glancing between them with knowing eyes, "I need to visit my sister across town, and it might take a while." "Austin, would you mind making sure Juliana gets home safely?" I do not like the idea of her being alone at the Caldwell place with Henry in Denver." Juliana opened her mouth to protest that she would be fine, that she did not need an escort, but Austin was already nodding. "I would be happy to," he said. "I will bring my wagon around while you finish your visit, Martha." Martha squeezed Juliana's hand and whispered, "You need someone to talk to, I think. Austin is a good listener." Then she was gone, leaving Juliana standing on the boardwalk wondering how her simple trip to town had become so complicated. 20 minutes later, Juliana found herself sitting beside Austin in his wagon as they headed toward the Caldwell ranch. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Austin said, "You do not have to pretend with me, Juliana. I can see you are not happy." Juliana stiffened. "I am fine." "You said that 3 times in 10 minutes. If you have to keep saying it, it is usually not true." Austin glanced at her. "Is he hurting you? Because if he is, I will know," Juliana interrupted quickly. "No, Henry is not cruel. He does not hurt me. He is just—" She trailed off, not sure how to explain. "Cold," Austin finished. "Distant. Treating you like a housekeeper rather than a wife." "He is providing for me as he promised," Juliana said, but her voice lacked conviction. "That is not enough," Austin said fiercely. "You deserve more than just provision. You deserve warmth and affection and conversation. You deserve to be valued for who you are, not just what you can do." "And who am I?" Juliana asked, feeling something break inside her. "I am nobody, an orphan from Boston with no money and no prospects. Henry gave me a home when I had nothing. I should be grateful." "You are not nobody," Austin said, his voice intense. "You are brave and strong and kind. You traveled across the country to start a new life. You keep your promises even when they cost you everything. You deserve to be with someone who sees all of that, who values it, who treasures you." Juliana felt tears welling up, and she blinked them back furiously. "Please stop." "Why?" "Because it is easier to pretend you are content than to admit you made a mistake." "I did not make a mistake," Juliana said, though the words felt hollow. "I made the only choice available to me." "There are always choices," Austin said. "Maybe not easy ones, but they exist." They had reached the boundary between the Northwood and Caldwell properties. Austin pulled the wagon to a stop, turning to face Juliana fully. "Leave him," Austin said quietly, urgently. "Come to the Circle Inn. Sarah and I will help you get a divorce or an annulment if possible. You can stay with us until you figure out what you want to do next." "You do not have to live like this." Juliana stared at him, her heart pounding. "I cannot do that. I am married. I made vows." "To a man who does not value you," Austin countered. "To a man who treats you like property. Those vows matter, Juliana, but so do you. Your happiness matters. Your future matters." "Why do you care?" Juliana whispered. "You barely know me." Austin was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Because from the moment I caught you on that train platform, I have not been able to stop thinking about you. Because in the few hours we spent together before you married Caldwell, I saw something special in you. Something worth protecting and cherishing. Because I made a promise to myself that if you ever needed help, I would be there. And I can see you need help now, even if you will not admit it." Juliana felt her carefully constructed walls crumbling. "Austin, I cannot. I gave my word. I am married." "Then leave anyway," Austin said desperately. "Not to come to me, but just to leave. Go to Denver, start fresh. You are young and capable. You could find work, build a new life. Anything would be better than slowly dying inside in that cold house with a man who does not care about you." "You are asking me to give up the only security I have," Juliana said, tears finally spilling over. "The only home I have. I cannot do that, Austin. I am not that brave." "You are the bravest person I know," Austin said softly. He reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. "But I understand. I do not agree, but I understand." He turned back to the reins, and they completed the journey to the Caldwell ranch in silence. When they arrived, Austin helped Juliana down from the wagon, his hands lingering on her waist. "If you ever change your mind," he said. "If you ever need help or just a friend, you know where to find me." "Thank you," Juliana whispered, "for everything. But I think it would be better if we did not see each other again. It only makes things harder." Pain flashed across Austin's face, but he nodded. "If that is what you want." "It is what has to be," Juliana corrected. Austin climbed back onto his wagon, then paused. "For what it is worth, Juliana, you deserved better than this. Better than Caldwell, better than me standing here making things harder for you. You deserve to be courted properly, to be wooed and won, to choose a husband you actually loved. I am sorry life did not give you that choice." Then he drove away, and Juliana stood watching until he disappeared over the rise. She went inside the empty house and finally allowed herself to cry properly, sobbing into her hands for all the things she could not have, for the life she had chosen and the one she had refused, for the man she was married to and the one she could not stop thinking about. When Henry returned from Denver the following Sunday, Juliana had herself under control again. She greeted him politely, served his dinner, answered his questions about how things had gone in his absence. She did not mention her trip to town or seeing Austin. There was no reason to. Nothing had happened. Nothing had changed. She was still Henry Caldwell's wife, and she would continue to be his wife, but something had shifted inside her. Austin's words had cracked something open, and now Juliana could not quite go back to the numb acceptance she had cultivated. She found herself watching Henry, really seeing him, and acknowledging that Martha's optimism had been misplaced. Henry was not lonely or shy or set in his ways. He was simply indifferent. He did not care about Juliana beyond her utility, and he never would. The question was whether she could live with that for the rest of her life. October brought the first frost, and with it, a new development that changed everything. Juliana woke one morning feeling nauseous, and when the feeling persisted for several days, she realized what it meant. She was pregnant. The realization filled her with complicated emotions. A part of her was glad, knowing a child would give her purpose and someone to love. But another part was frightened, knowing she would be bringing a child into this cold household, raising a baby with a father who would likely be as indifferent to their child as he was to her. When she told Henry, he nodded once and said, "Good. A son to help with the ranch work eventually." That was the extent of his reaction. No joy, no concern for her welfare, no acknowledgement that this was a significant event. Just satisfaction that his investment in a wife was yielding the expected return. Martha was more enthusiastic when Juliana shared the news with her. "A baby! How wonderful!" "Oh, Juliana, this will make everything better, you will see. Children bring such joy." Juliana wanted to believe her, but she could not quite manage it. Still, she threw herself into preparing for the baby's arrival, grateful for a project that gave her days meaning. She sewed tiny clothes, set up a cradle in the corner of the bedroom, knitted blankets and booties. Henry watched these activities with distant approval, but did not participate or show particular interest. Winter set in hard and early. By November, snow blanketed the ranch, and Juliana found herself even more isolated. The cold kept her inside most days, and Henry's work kept him outside for long hours. Days would pass with barely any conversation between them beyond the necessary exchanges about meals and household matters. Juliana was 6 months along and showing noticeably when Martha came to visit with unexpected news. "Austin Northwood is getting married," Martha announced, watching Juliana's face carefully. Juliana felt her heart stop. "Married?" Yes, to Rachel Sterling from Denver. She is a widow, apparently quite wealthy. They are planning a spring wedding. I thought you should know, since you and Austin were friendly when you first arrived. Juliana managed to keep her expression neutral, though inside she felt like she was breaking. That is wonderful news. I hope he will be very happy. Martha's eyes were knowing and sympathetic. Are you all right, dear? Of course, Juliana lied. Why would I not be? After Martha left, Juliana went to her room and allowed herself exactly 5 minutes of tears, just as she had that first day at the Caldwell ranch. Then she dried her eyes and reminded herself that Austin Northwood's marriage had nothing to do with her. She was married to Henry, carrying his child, and Austin was doing exactly what she had told him to do, moving on with his life. It was the right thing, the proper thing, and it hurt more than she could have imagined. December brought heavier snow and a letter that arrived via a neighbor who had been in town. Henry handed it to Juliana without comment, though his eyes were curious. The return address showed it was from Sarah at the Circle Inn. Juliana opened it with trembling fingers. Dear Juliana, it read. I hope this letter finds you well and that you are bearing up under the winter weather. I wanted to reach out because I have heard concerning news. Martha tells me you are expecting a baby, which is wonderful, but she also says you seem very thin and tired. I know Henry is not the warmest man, and I worry about you being isolated out there, especially with a child on the way. Please know that you are welcome at the Circle and anytime for any reason. If you need help or just company or anything at all, send word. I also wanted you to know that the news of Austin's engagement is not true. He told me he was tired of people asking when he would marry, so he made up a story about being engaged to end the questions. There is no Rachel Sterling. There is only a stubborn man who cannot stop thinking about a woman he met on a train platform, and who thinks he has no right to pursue his feelings because she is married to someone else. I probably should not tell you this, but I think you should know the truth. Whatever you do with this information is up to you. With affection, Sarah. Juliana read the letter 3 times, her heart pounding. Austin was not engaged. He was not moving on. He was still thinking about her, still keeping his promise to be there if she needed him. And God help her, she needed him. Not to leave Henry or run away, but just to know that someone in the world cared about her as a person, not just as a cook or a housekeeper or a vessel for children. She needed to know she mattered to someone. But she was married, and she was pregnant, and there was nothing she could do with her feelings except bury them deep and try to survive. January brought the worst blizzard the area had seen in years. For 3 days, the snow fell so heavily that they could barely see the barn from the house. Henry was trapped outside for hours when the storm hit suddenly while he was checking the cattle, and by the time he made it back to the house, he was half frozen. Juliana got him inside and out of his wet clothes, wrapped him in blankets, and made hot soup. For the first time since their marriage, Henry looked at her with something approaching gratitude. Thank you, he said, his teeth still chattering. That was smart thinking. It was perhaps the kindest thing he had said to her in their 6 months of marriage. Juliana felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this would change things. Maybe this would be the moment they finally connected as husband and wife. But by the next day, Henry was back to his normal distant self, and the moment was gone as if it had never happened. The blizzard passed, but it left snowdrifts as tall as a man and temperatures that stayed below freezing for weeks. Juliana found it harder to get around as her pregnancy advanced, and the cold made everything more difficult. She was 7 months along now, and the baby's movements had become strong and frequent. Sometimes, late at night, she would lie awake with her hands on her belly, feeling her child move and wonder what kind of mother she would be. Would she be able to give her child the warmth and affection she had never received from Henry? Would she be able to create a loving environment in this cold house? Would her child grow up knowing they were valued and treasured, even if their father never showed it? She had to believe the answer was yes. Her child would be her purpose, her joy, the reason she survived. She would make sure of it. February brought a thaw, and with it, another visit from Martha. She arrived looking excited and conspiratorial. "I have news," she announced. "Austin Northwood has opened his ranch to neighbors who need help this winter. Several families lost livestock in the blizzard and are struggling. Austin is providing food and supplies, asking for nothing in return. He is also hiring anyone who needs work, even if he does not really need the extra hands. People are saying he is the most generous man in the county." "That sounds like him," Juliana said quietly. "There is more," Martha said, her voice gentler now. "He asked about you specifically. Wanted to know if you had everything you needed, if the baby was healthy, if Henry was prepared for the birth. He seemed very concerned." Juliana felt her eyes sting with tears. Even now, even separated by distance and propriety and her marriage vows, Austin was still looking out for her. Still keeping his promise. "Tell him I am fine if you see him," Juliana said. "Tell him I appreciate his concern, but everything is fine." Martha squeezed her hand. "You can talk to me, you know. Whatever you say would stay between us." Juliana was tempted, so tempted to finally tell someone the truth about her marriage, about her loneliness, about the ache in her chest every time she thought about Austin Northwood. But what good would it do? She was still married, still pregnant, still trapped in the choice she had made. "There is nothing to talk about," she said. "I am Henry's wife, and I will be the mother of his child. That is my life now." Martha looked sad but did not push. After she left, Juliana stood at the window, looking out at the snow-covered landscape, and wondered how long she could keep pretending her heart was not breaking. March arrived, bringing the first hints of spring and Juliana's imminent delivery. She was 8 months along now, and the baby was due within the next few weeks. Martha had agreed to be there for the birth, along with the doctor from town, and Henry had grudgingly agreed to pay for whatever help was needed. Juliana prepared as best she could, but she was frightened. Her mother had died when Juliana was 12, and Juliana remembered very little about pregnancy and childbirth beyond the fear that had filled their house before her mother's death. She knew childbirth was dangerous, that women died, that nothing was guaranteed. She tried not to think about it, but as her due date approached, the fear grew. On a particularly difficult night when the fear was overwhelming and she could not sleep, Juliana did something she had sworn she would not do. She wrote a letter to Austin. "Dear Austin," she wrote, "I am writing to you against my better judgment, but I find I need to say these things, even if I never send this letter. I am frightened. The baby will come soon, and I am terrified that something will go wrong, that I will die like my mother did, and no one will care. Henry would care about losing a housekeeper and the inconvenience of it, but he would not mourn me. There would be no one to mourn me. I wanted you to know that your kindness meant everything to me. When I fainted on that train platform and you caught me, it was the first time in a long time that anyone had treated me like I mattered. I have tried to forget that feeling, but I cannot. I want you to know that if something happens to me, there was someone in the world who cared, who saw me, who thought I deserved better. Thank you for that. Even if we never speak again, thank you. Juliana." She sealed the letter and hid it in her trunk, unsure whether she would ever send it, but feeling better for having written it. 2 days later, in the early hours of the morning, her labor began. Henry rode to fetch Martha and the doctor, and then disappeared to the barn, clearly uncomfortable with what was happening in his house. Juliana labored for 12 hours, with Martha holding her hand and the doctor monitoring her progress. It was the longest, most painful experience of her life, and there were moments when she was certain she would die. But as evening approached, she finally delivered a healthy baby boy. The doctor placed the tiny, squalling infant in her arms, and Juliana looked down at her son's red, wrinkled face and felt her heart expand in a way she had never imagined possible. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I am your mother, and I promise you I will love you enough for both of us." When Henry came in to see his son, he looked at the baby with the same assessing expression he used for everything else. "He looks healthy. What will you name him?" Juliana had not discussed names with Henry, and she realized he was not going to offer any suggestions. The baby's name was just another task for her to handle. "James," she said, thinking of her father. "James Henry Caldwell." Henry nodded. "James is fine. I will send word to the neighbors." He left again, and Juliana was alone with her son and Martha, who was cleaning up. Martha smiled at her. "You did wonderfully, and he is beautiful. He is not he?" Juliana ran her finger over the baby's soft cheek. "I cannot believe he is mine." "You will be a wonderful mother," Martha said firmly. "I can see it already." As Juliana held her sleeping son, she made a silent promise. She would give James all the love she had never received from Henry. She would make sure he grew up knowing he was valued and treasured. She would create warmth in this cold house, even if she had to do it alone. Her son would never feel the loneliness she felt. It was not the life she had dreamed of, but it was the life she had, and she would make it enough. She had to. The next few weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and learning to care for a newborn. James was a good baby, healthy and alert, and Juliana found unexpected joy in motherhood. For the first time since arriving in Colorado, she felt like she had a purpose beyond mere survival. Henry showed little interest in his son beyond brief observations about the baby's health. He did not offer to help with nighttime feedings or diaper changes, and he seemed annoyed when James's crying interrupted his sleep. But he also did not complain about the additional work Juliana had taken on, and he paid the doctor's bill without comment. It was more than Juliana had expected, if less than she had hoped for. One afternoon in late April, when James was nearly 2 months old, Juliana heard horses in the yard. She looked out to see several wagons approaching, and her heart stopped when she recognized the lead wagon. It was Austin Northwood, along with Sarah and several other neighbors. Henry emerged from the barn, and Juliana watched through the window as Austin approached him. They spoke briefly, then Henry nodded and gestured toward the house. Austin and the group started unloading things from their wagons: food, supplies, blankets, and what looked like furniture. Juliana opened the door, holding James, and stepped onto the porch. Austin saw her and stopped, his eyes immediately going to the baby in her arms. Something powerful and painful crossed his face. "Miss Juliana," he said, catching himself. "Mrs. Caldwell, I mean. Forgive the intrusion. The neighbors wanted to bring some things for the baby. It is a tradition around here when a child is born." Sarah bustled forward, beaming. "Oh, let me see him. What a beautiful boy." She looked at Juliana with warm eyes. "How are you feeling, dear? Are you recovered from the birth?" "I am well, thank you," Juliana said, acutely aware of Austin standing a few feet away, not quite looking at her. "This is very kind of you all." For the next hour, the neighbors brought in their gifts and fussed over the baby. Someone had made a new cradle, more elaborate than the simple one Juliana had been using. Sarah had knitted a beautiful blanket. Martha had made baby clothes. Others brought food and supplies. It was an overwhelming display of generosity from people who barely knew her. Austin hung back, helping to carry things but staying out of the way. When the others had left their gifts and departed, he was the last one standing in the yard. Juliana, still holding James, approached him. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for organizing this. It was very thoughtful." "It was not me," Austin said, though his ears went red in a way that suggested he was lying. "It was everyone. Still, thank you." Juliana hesitated, then added, "Would you like to hold him?" Austin's eyes went wide. "I do not know much about babies. Neither did I before James. It is simple. Just support his head." Carefully, Juliana transferred the baby to Austin's arms. Austin held James with surprising gentleness, looking down at the tiny boy with an expression of wonder. "He is beautiful," Austin said softly. "He has your eyes." "Do you think so? I thought he looked like Henry." "No," Austin said firmly. "He has your eyes and your chin. He looks like you." They stood like that for a moment, Austin holding her baby, Juliana watching them both, and something passed between them that neither could acknowledge but both felt. A connection, a longing, a recognition of what might have been in different circumstances. Then Henry's voice cut through the moment. "Northwood, are you staying for dinner or leaving?" The spell broke. Austin carefully handed James back to Juliana, his fingers brushing hers in the transfer. "I should go. But if you ever need anything, Mrs. Caldwell, anything at all, you know where to find me." "I do," Juliana whispered. "Thank you, Austin." His eyes met hers at the sound of his first name, and she saw everything she was feeling reflected back: longing, regret, affection that could not be acted upon. Then he turned and walked to his wagon, climbing up and driving away without looking back. Henry appeared beside Juliana. "Northwood is a good neighbor," he said, surprising her. "Always willing to help, though I do not need charity." "It was not charity," Juliana said. "It was kindness." "There is a difference." Henry grunted and went back to the barn. Juliana stood on the porch, holding James and watching the dust from Austin's wagon settle, and wondered how long she could keep living like this. Summer came, and with it, a drought that worried everyone. The creek levels dropped, and the grass turned brown. Ranchers watched their cattle anxiously and prayed for rain. Henry became even more distracted and short-tempered, worried about losing livestock. Juliana cared for James and tried to keep the household running smoothly despite the increased tension. Her son was growing quickly, becoming more alert and responsive. He smiled now and made baby sounds that delighted her and had started to reach for things. He was the light in her days, the reason she got up each morning. But as the drought wore on and the situation became more desperate, even James's sweet presence could not dispel the gloom that had settled over the Caldwell ranch. Henry snapped at her over minor things, complained about the meals, and spent more time away from the house. Juliana knew he was stressed about the ranch, but his behavior made an already difficult situation nearly unbearable. In August, the situation came to a head. Henry came in for dinner one evening in a foul mood. Juliana had made stew, using the last of their fresh vegetables from the struggling garden, but Henry took one bite and shoved the bowl away. "This is barely fit for pigs," he said. Juliana felt something inside her snap. 8 months of being treated like a servant, of cold indifference, of loneliness and isolation, and now this. "Then do not eat it," she said, her voice shaking but firm. Henry looked up, surprised. "What did you say?" "I said do not eat it if you do not like it. I am doing the best I can with what we have. The garden is dying from the drought. We are low on supplies because you said we could not afford to go to town, and I have been up since dawn taking care of your son while also trying to keep this house running. If my cooking does not meet your standards, perhaps you should try doing it yourself." Henry stood up, his face dark. "You do not talk to me like that. I am your husband." "Then act like one," Juliana shot back, surprising herself with her boldness. You wanted a wife, Henry, but you treat me like hired help. You have a son you barely acknowledge. You live in this house like it is a hotel, expecting service but giving nothing in return. I have kept my end of our agreement. I cook and clean and mend and care for our child. But I am a person, not a tool. I deserve at least basic respect. Respect. Henry's voice was cold. I gave you a home when you had nothing. I took you in and married you and gave you security. You should be grateful. I am grateful, Juliana said, tears streaming down her face now. I am grateful every day for the roof over my head and the food I eat. But gratitude is not enough to live on, Henry. I am so lonely I could die. You do not talk to me. You do not see me. You do not care about anything except whether your meals are on time and your shirts are mended. I am withering away in this house, and you do not even notice. Henry stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then he said, I gave you what I promised. It is not my fault if you expected more. He grabbed his hat and walked out, leaving Juliana standing in the kitchen, shaking with reaction to her outburst. In the bedroom, James started crying, and Juliana wiped her tears, took a deep breath, and went to comfort her son. When Henry came back hours later, he went straight to bed without speaking. The next morning he left at dawn, and they did not discuss what had happened. But something had changed. The pretense of civility had cracked, and now they both knew the truth. Their marriage was a hollow shell, and nothing would change that. Juliana found the letter she had written to Austin before James's birth and read it again. Then, with trembling hands, she added a postscript. I cannot live like this anymore. I'm not strong enough. I thought I could survive without love or connection, but I was wrong. I am breaking, Austin. I am slowly breaking, and I do not know how to stop it. James is the only thing keeping me going, but what kind of mother will I be if I am empty inside? What kind of life will he have in this cold house with parents who cannot even speak to each other? I do not know what to do. I am trapped by my own choices, by my own words about keeping promises and honor. But I am drowning, and I do not know how much longer I can keep my head above water. Please forgive me for burdening you with this. I have no right to reach out, no claim on your friendship or concern. But I needed to tell someone, and you are the only person in the world who might understand. J. This time, she sealed the letter and gave it to Martha during her next visit, asking her to deliver it to Austin. Martha took it without question, her eyes full of sympathy. 3 days later, Austin appeared at the Caldwell ranch. Henry was in the north pasture, and Juliana was in the garden with James playing on a blanket nearby. She looked up to see Austin riding toward her, and her heart began to race. He dismounted and crossed to her quickly, his face set with determination. Juliana. Austin, you should not be here. If Henry sees you, I do not care, Austin said. I got your letter, and I am not going to stand by any longer while you suffer. You are leaving with me now, today. Juliana stared at him. I cannot. Yes, you can, Austin said firmly. You can and you will. I should have insisted on this months ago, but I was trying to respect your choices and your sense of honor. But your letter broke my heart, Juliana. I am not going to let you drown. I caught you once when you fell, and I will catch you again. But I am married, Juliana protested weakly. And James will come too, of course, Austin said. Both of you will come to the Circle Inn. You can stay in the guest room. Sarah will be there as chaperone, and we will figure out the rest later. Divorce, annulment, legal separation, whatever we need to do. But you are not staying here another day. Henry will not allow it, Juliana said, even as hope began to bloom in her chest. Henry can go to hell, Austin said bluntly. Forgive my language, but I am done pretending he has any claim on you beyond a piece of paper. He broke your marriage vows the moment he started treating you like a servant. You owe him nothing." Juliana looked down at James, playing happily on his blanket, then back at Austin's fierce, determined face. She thought about the life she was living, the loneliness, the cold emptiness of her days. She thought about what kind of mother she could be in this environment, and what kind of life James would have growing up in a house with no love or warmth. And she thought about Austin, who had caught her when she fell and had been trying to catch her ever since. Who saw her, valued her, cared about her well-being above his own comfort. Who was offering her a chance at something better, even if it meant complications and challenges. "All right," she whispered. "All right, I will come." Austin's face transformed, relief and joy flooding his features. "Right now. Go pack whatever you need, I will wait here." Juliana hurried into the house, her heart pounding. She threw her few belongings and James's things into her trunk, moving quickly before she could change her mind. She left a note for Henry on the table. "Henry, I am leaving. This marriage is not working, and we both know it. I am taking James with me. I am sorry I could not be what you needed, but I cannot continue living like this. I will send word about formal arrangements once I have figured them out. I hope you find someone who is better suited to be your wife. Juliana." She picked up James and her trunk, took one last look at the house that had been her home for the past 10 months and walked out. Austin took the trunk from her, secured it in his wagon, then helped her and James up onto the seat. "Are you sure?" he asked, giving her one last chance to change her mind. "I am sure," Juliana said, and meant it. They drove away from the Caldwell ranch, and with every mile they covered, Juliana felt lighter. She knew there would be complications, that people would talk, that there would be legal and social consequences. But she also knew that she had made the right choice. For herself, for James, and for the possibility of a future that held more than just survival. When the Circle N came into view, Juliana felt tears on her cheeks, but for the first time in months, they were tears of relief rather than despair. Sarah was waiting on the porch, and she opened her arms as Juliana climbed down. "Welcome home, dear," Sarah said, and Juliana realized that was exactly what it felt like. Home. The next few weeks were complicated and difficult. Henry came to the Circle N twice, demanding Juliana return. The first time, Austin met him in the yard and told him firmly that Juliana was staying of her own free will and would not be returning. The second time, Juliana spoke to Henry herself, making it clear that their marriage was over and that she would be pursuing whatever legal action was necessary to formalize the separation. Henry was angry and offended, but he did not fight hard to get her back. Juliana suspected his pride was hurt more than his heart, and that he was already thinking about finding a more suitable wife, one who would accept her place more readily. In September, Juliana filed for divorce on the grounds of emotional cruelty and abandonment of marital duties. It was a bold move that caused quite a bit of gossip in Montrose, but with Austin and Sarah supporting her, and with Martha willing to testify to what she had observed, the judge eventually granted the divorce. Through it all, Austin was there but never pushed. He gave Juliana space to heal, time to figure out who she was outside of being Henry's wife. He played with James, making the baby laugh with his silly faces and gentle roughhousing. He talked with Juliana for hours, learning about her past, her dreams, her fears. And slowly, carefully, they built something neither of them had quite expected. It started with friendship. Juliana would join Austin on the porch in the evenings after James was asleep, and they would talk while watching the sun set over the mountains. They discovered they both loved books and took turns reading aloud to each other. They found they shared similar views on fairness, justice, and the importance of treating people with dignity. Then friendship deepened into something more. Austin made Juliana laugh, something she had not done in months. Juliana challenged Austin to think about things differently, asking questions that pushed him to examine his assumptions. They became partners in running the ranch, with Juliana proving to have a good head for numbers and organization. And gradually, inevitably, they fell in love. It happened slowly, then all at once. One evening in October, nearly a year after they had first met on the train platform, Austin and Juliana were sitting on the porch as usual. James was asleep upstairs. Sarah had gone to her room and the night was clear and cool. "Juliana," Austin said softly, "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" Juliana asked, turning to look at him. "I am in love with you," Austin said simply. "I have been since the moment I caught you on that train platform. I know you might not be ready to hear this, that you might need more time after everything you have been through, and I will wait as long as you need. But I wanted you to know, I love you. Not as a friend or a neighbor or someone who wants to help you. I love you as a man loves a woman, completely and truly and without reservation." Juliana felt her heart swell. "Austin, you do not have to say anything," Austin interrupted gently. "I just needed you to know." "But I want to say something," Juliana said, reaching for his hand. "I love you too. I think I have loved you since you caught me when I fell, since you refused to let me go off with Henry that first day, since you promised you would always be there if I needed you. I love you, Austin Northwood, and I am so grateful you caught me and refused to let me fall again." Austin's eyes shone with emotion. "Can I kiss you, please?" Juliana whispered. The kiss was everything Juliana had never known a kiss could be. Gentle but passionate, tender but claiming, full of promise and possibility. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard, and Juliana felt like her heart might burst with happiness. "Will you marry me?" Austin asked. "Properly this time, with courting and romance and everything you deserve." "Yes," Juliana said through happy tears. "Yes, I will marry you." They married in the spring of 1874, 18 months after Juliana had first arrived in Montrose. The wedding was everything her first one had not been: joyful, meaningful, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about them. Sarah cried happy tears. Martha beamed. Even the doctor from the train platform attended, joking that he was glad to see the young woman he had helped revive that hot July day had found happiness. James, now a toddler, was part of the ceremony, standing between Austin and Juliana as they said their vows. Austin had legally adopted James shortly before the wedding, wanting to make sure the boy knew he was loved and claimed as a son in every way that mattered. Their life together was not perfect, but it was good. Austin taught Juliana to ride, and they would explore the ranch together, with James secured in a special carrier Austin had made. Juliana helped Austin expand his operations, proving to have a natural talent for business. In the fall of 1874, Juliana discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the news was met with joy and excitement. Austin was thrilled, constantly fussing over Juliana and making sure she had everything she needed. James, now 2, seemed to understand in his childlike way that something special was coming. The baby, a girl they named Emma Rose after Sarah's daughter and Juliana's mother, arrived in May of 1875. Austin cried when he held his daughter for the first time, and Juliana fell in love with him all over again, watching him be the father she had always hoped her children would have. They had 2 more children over the next few years: another son, Michael, in 1877, and a daughter, Sarah Jane, in 1879. The Circle N prospered under their combined management, becoming one of the most successful ranches in the area. As the years passed, Juliana occasionally thought about that July day in 1872, when she had stepped off the train, desperate and alone, and had fainted on the platform. She thought about Austin catching her, refusing to let her fall, and then spending the next months trying to catch her again until she finally let him. She thought about Henry Caldwell too, though without bitterness. She had heard he eventually married again, to a widow from Denver who seemed better suited to his temperament. She hoped he had found whatever happiness he was capable of finding, but mostly, she thought about how lucky she was. Lucky that Austin had been on that platform, that he had caught her, that he had cared enough to keep trying even when she pushed him away. Lucky that she had found the courage to leave when staying was killing her spirit. Lucky that love had given her a second chance. On a summer evening in 1885, Juliana sat on the porch of the Circle N, watching her children play in the yard. James was 13 now, tall and kind like his stepfather. Emma was 10, clever and quick-witted. Michael was 8, adventurous and bold. And Sarah Jane was 6, sweet and gentle. They were good children, loved and loving, growing up in a home filled with warmth and laughter. Austin came out and sat beside her, taking her hand. At 38, he was still the handsome cowboy who had caught her all those years ago, though his hair now had threads of silver and laugh lines crinkled around his eyes. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, bringing her hand to his lips. "About falling and being caught," Juliana said. "About how you refused to let me fall again." Austin smiled. "I will always catch you, Juliana, always. That is what love does. It catches you when you fall and holds you when you cannot stand. It refuses to let you face the world alone." "I know," Juliana said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I know, my love. And I am so grateful every day that you were on that platform, that you saw me, that you cared. You saved my life, Austin Northwood." "No," Austin said softly, kissing the top of her head. "You saved yourself. I just made sure you did not hit the ground while you were doing it." They sat together as the sun set, surrounded by the sounds of their children's laughter, the cattle lowing in the distance, and the wind whispering through the sage. It was not the life Juliana had imagined when she left Boston all those years ago, desperate and alone. It was so much better. She had come to Colorado seeking survival and had found love instead. She had thought she was making a practical choice, and had discovered that sometimes the most impractical choice was the one that saved you. She had fainted on a train platform, and a cowboy had caught her and refused to let her fall again. And in catching her, he had taught her that she was worth catching, worth fighting for, worth loving. That was the greatest gift of all. As darkness fell and Austin called the children in for supper, Juliana took one last look at the ranch, the mountains, the endless sky. This was home. Not because it was where she lived, but because it was where she was loved, and that made all the difference. Years continued to pass in happiness and prosperity. James grew into a fine young man and eventually took over much of the ranch operations, proving to have his mother's head for business and his father's steady nature. He married a smart, kind woman named Elizabeth, and they gave Juliana and Austin their first grandchildren. Emma became a teacher in Montrose, educating the children of ranchers and townspeople alike, bringing her sharp mind and fierce compassion to every student. Michael followed in his father's footsteps, expanding the Circle N's reputation for quality cattle and fair dealing. And Sarah Jane, true to her gentle nature, became known throughout the area for her skills as a healer, learning from the doctor who had given Juliana water on that first day and eventually taking over much of his practice. In 1895, on the 23rd anniversary of the day they had met, Austin and Juliana stood together on the same train platform where he had caught her all those years ago. They were older now, Juliana 45 and Austin 50, but their love had only deepened with time. You remember? Austin asked, his arm around her waist. Every moment, Juliana said, smiling up at him. How could I forget? You caught me when I fell, and you have been catching me ever since. And I will keep catching you, Austin promised, for as long as we have. They stood together watching the trains come and go, bringing new arrivals to Montrose just as Juliana had once arrived. And Juliana thought about all the other women like her, traveling west in search of new lives, hoping for second chances, brave enough to take risks despite their fears. She hoped they would be as lucky as she had been. Lucky enough to find someone who would catch them when they fell, who would refuse to let them face the world alone, who would turn practical arrangements into something beautiful and real. In the end, that was what love did. It caught you when you fell and refused to let you fall again. It held you steady when the world shook. It made a home not out of buildings and land, but out of hearts joined in understanding, respect, and devotion. Juliana had sought survival and found love. She had thought she was making a practical choice, and had discovered that the most important choices were matters of the heart. She had been lost and was found, was falling and was caught, was dying and was saved. And it had all started on a July day in 1872, when a cowboy on a train platform had caught a fainting woman and had promised in that moment to never let her fall again. It was a promise Austin Northwood had kept for 23 years and would keep for the rest of their lives together, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, building a legacy of love that would endure long after they were gone. And that was everything Juliana Norton Northwood could have ever asked for.